Hello and welcome to the last video in my dungeon leveling series where I level a paladin from 30 to 80 in dungeons only. In the last guide we hit level 78 in Botanica, and now we're going to do our last two levels in Draktherin Keep. If you watched the previous video, you may remember that I was using engineering items to clear more effectively, and this is still the case with Draktherin Keep. It's more important than ever before that we maximize our damage on our healing, as these higher level dungeons are pretty difficult. The mobs hit harder and they have mechanics that are harder to deal with than the ones we've faced so far. With that being said, let's take a very quick look at my spec and my gear, and then we'll jump right into the run. Here's what your spec should look like at level 78. We only have one more point to put in at level 79, and then after that we're going to be 80, so it doesn't really matter. And that one point that we have is going to go into improved devotion aura, which means you're going to have 2 points in it at level 79. This talent is pretty useful for when we get Sunder armor stacks in Draktherin, because we can swap over to devotion aura and still retain a decent amount of physical damage reduction. The passive healing that comes from this talent is also very nice when you combine it with divinity. Our gear is mostly comprised of a lot of the same pieces from the last video, with just a few upgrades from the auction house that become available at level 78. Some of these upgrades are the daunting hand guards and leg plates, and the ring of earth and might here. Let's go ahead and get started with the run. The first hallway in this dungeon is by far the hardest part. You have to deal with Sunder armor stacks from the Risen Warriors, along with a Void Zone and a Shadow Damage knockback from the mages, and on top of that you also have to deal with Cripple and Frostbolt from the Humanoid caster. I usually only pull one pack at a time in this hallway, with the exception of pulling the first two mobs from the RP event into the next pack. You can nuke these packs down individually with Seal of Command, but if you notice yourself getting too low, then just swap over to Seal of Light. You have to constantly move around to dodge the Void Zones on the ground, especially if you get multiple mages in a pack. You also have to be aware of the number of Sunder armor stacks you have. These stack up to 10 and reduce your armor by 10% per stack. This means that at 10 stacks you actually have 0 armor and you take massive amounts of melee damage. In this clip I actually pre-potted an indestructible potion, which gives me a good amount of armor for 2 minutes, but it's not a requirement, it just kind of helps out with the damage a bit. This is where that improved devotion aura can really help out. If you notice your stacks are getting too high, then you can swap over to devotion aura or just pop off the stacks. Also make sure to dispel cripple off of yourself, as it's a huge decrease in your damage and your healing output. These mobs are also undead, so you can use Holy Wrath and kite them for a bit if you want to try and drop Sunder stacks or you need a few seconds to recover. Just be careful when you're using that in here, as it syncs up their melee swing timers and reduces the number of parry haste you'll get naturally. Doing this can actually impact your damage and healing instead of being helpful, so just use your best judgment on using Holy Wrath or not. When you're not using Devotion Aura, you should use Shadow Resist Aura to mitigate some of that damage from the Soul Mages. After this first hallway is cleared, you can swap over to Devotion Aura and use it for the rest of the dungeon. You can see here I pull up my character sheet, and even though I have 10 stacks of Sunder armor, which reduces my armor by 100%, I still am able to retain about 20% damage reduction by using this indestructible potion and my devotion aura. The next room is pretty straightforward. The ghouls have some bleed and armor reducing effects, and the abomination has a disease that you should be dispelling immediately. You want to try and dispel that disease as quick as you possibly can, because if you let it tick just even a few times, when you add it on to the armor reduction and the bleed effects from the ghouls as well as all the melee damage, it's a lot of damage and you can die really quickly. Also, a quick note, if you wanted to, you could pull the boss down from the top of the stairs and try killing him with these packs. It does add to your overall amount of experience per run. However, it does take a bit longer because he has a ton of health, and using Seal of Light really isn't very good for doing damage. So it's up to you if you want to spend the extra time killing him to try and just squeeze out a bit more experience per run. But generally what I try to do is just get as much experience as I can within 12 minutes and then run out to reset. This means I try to skip things that take too long to kill for the amount of experience they give, such as bosses or mobs that have really high HP values that don't give any more experience. If you decide not to kill him, then just go ahead and run by him. As soon as he gets into the room with the spiders, he's gonna reset. When we do get in this room, we want to run all around and break the spider webs to free the trolls inside for some extra experience. This part is a little bit annoying because you'll get rooted to the ground over and over, and the trolls you free will sometimes be shamans that just stand there casting lightning bolt. You can also get rooted to the ground at a bad time and the mobs will actually path behind you, and this can be really deadly if your freedom is on cooldown. Just try your best to kill all the webs really quickly, and always keep the front of your character facing the mobs. Once you've freed all the trolls, then you can go into the next hallway to LOS and pull everything together. You should focus down the spiders first and then move on to the shamans. You may notice that the shamans cast a fake chain heal that doesn't actually do any healing, so you don't have to worry about interrupting it. The web is really the most dangerous thing here because the shaman AI will make the mobs run away to cast lightning bolt as soon as you get rooted. This actually makes them a really bad target for healing through melee because they won't always be in range, and that's why we focus the spiders first. You can sometimes trick them by positioning them between your character and the wall, and then when you get rooted they don't move, but honestly it's a little bit too difficult with all the roots going around, so you're better off just hitting the spiders and out healing the lightning bolts. If you find this pull too difficult, then you can split it up into 2 separate pulls. We're at about 200,000 experience in 8 minutes, so our run is looking pretty good so far. We're gonna run by this boss by hugging the right wall and go right into the next area. Pull these bats into the first patrol that's located outside. The mobs you should look out for in this area are the Drakari handlers. They have a net ability similar to the spiders, and they run away and shoot you from ranged. You can freedom this off and run into melee to group them up again. The scary thing about them is when they're in melee range, they will occasionally use a backhand ability, which is a stun that lasts a few seconds. It's not too bad to deal with as long as you don't get hit with it at low HP. You should always use Seal of Light during this pull and the next pull so you can live through the stuns from the handlers. At this point, your bops should also be available in case of emergency. Once you've got the handler dead from this pull, then you can move on to the next one. You never want to pull the second patrol out here because it contains 2 more handlers, and all 3 of them netting you and stunning you would be really hard to deal with. But it's okay because even killing them separately, we're still able to do this run in about 12 to 13 minutes. For this next part, we're going to time the dinosaur boss's patrol to grab all of the raptors without pulling him. He patrols up and down the left side of this area. When he's going towards the back, you can safely run in and pull all of the raptors onto the right side. Then when you have an opening, you can run out. We can safely grab all of the raptors in this area at the same time because they really don't do too much damage. I also experimented with killing this boss, but he's just a bit too difficult at our current level when you combine it with all of these raptors. These raptors are actually the last pull before we're done with the entire dungeon. However, if you're trying to maximize the amount of experience you get per run instead of experience per hour, then you can go up the stairs and pull even more mobs up there. Just make sure that you reset them by standing on an evade spot, otherwise they won't give full experience. Once all the raptors are dead, you're pretty much done here and you can go ahead and run out and reset. You'll want to stay in here until you're level 80, and then at that point you're free to do whatever you want. Since this is my last video that I'm doing in this series, I'll just quickly summarize my experience in leveling from 30 to 80 in dungeons only. Overall, it's definitely faster than questing. I found myself leveling up so quickly in some brackets that I actually had a limited amount of runs to test out the full potential of certain areas. It's also a pretty unique and interesting way to level. A lot of burnout I've experienced when leveling in alt comes from doing the same quests that I've been doing for 15 years. You really have to get into the right mindset to immerse and focus on efficient questing, and it's really hard to do when you're not really interested in the method. Leveling by yourself in dungeons definitely freshens it up for a little while. However, dungeon leveling can also feel kind of grindy, especially when you've already done it a few times like I have. So I like to think that the fastest and best way to level is probably a mixture of both solo dungeon grinding and questing where appropriate. There's also some really nice quest rewards out there that could have helped me along my way to 80, but I didn't want to deviate from my original goal of no questing for this series. I probably also would have went back and leveled engineering a lot sooner, but my original intent was to try and keep the requirements as bare bones as possible. So there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this series as much as I enjoyed making it. Don't forget to subscribe for more leveling guides in the future and to see gold farming and boosting videos as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.